You will not always be applauded. You will not always be seen. But that does not mean you are not powerful. There is a kind of strength that doesn't roar. It doesn't make headlines. It isn't validated with applause or praise. And yet, it builds empires, raises generations, and survives in silence. It is the strength of a woman who rises when no one sees her fall. When society whispers, "You can't do this alone," some women hear that as a challenge, not a limitation. Because they've had to learn something most people never do, how to rely on themselves when no one else shows up. In a world still shaped by outdated gender expectations, where roles are assigned rather than chosen, women are rewriting their narrative. They are pushing beyond the margins and stepping into spaces they were told weren't meant for them. They are becoming founders, CEOs, single mothers, visionaries. Not because it's easy, but because they've had no choice but to become strong. Across the globe, more women are building businesses than ever before. Not just to make a living, but to make a statement. We are not waiting to be invited. We're creating our own table. Whether it's tech startups, creative enterprises, or grassroots movements, women are not just participating, they're leading. They're doing it while balancing motherhood, caregiving, cultural judgment, and the lingering shadows of imposter syndrome. And yet they press forward. They are taking control of their finances, learning skills, building independence. Not because it's handed to them, but because they've decided, I will not be limited by the support I didn't get. Strength isn't the absence of hardship. It's how you rise within it. People misunderstand this all the time. They think strength is about perfection, about getting everything right, about walking through life unscathed, confident, and untouched by chaos. But that's a lie. Real strength, true psychological resilience, is something forged in the fire of struggle. It's born in the moments when everything falls apart, when you're staring at the rubble of your expectations, and something inside of you says, keep going. That moment, that voice, it's not loud. It doesn't shout. Sometimes it barely whispers, but it's there. And that's the essence of strength. It isn't the roar of certainty. It's the quiet refusal to give up, even when every part of you acts to lie down and quit. That kind of strength, it's invisible to most people. They don't see the late nights, the battles in your own mind, the weight you carry in your chest. They just see you still standing, and they call you strong. But they don't know what that strength cost. For so many women, life doesn't offer a soft landing. It offers demands, expectations, limitations. You're told to be everything to everyone, and yet somehow you're still expected to be small, to be pleasing, to not take up too much space. You're expected to care, to nurture, to give, and when you ask for something in return, you're told to be grateful, to stop complaining, to remember your role. But here's the truth. Those roles were never written by you. And when life shatters the illusions you were handed, when you find yourself alone with no support, no roadmap, no applause, that is the moment you meet yourself. And that is when you begin to realize what you're made of. Strength doesn't emerge when everything is going well. It reveals itself in chaos. It shows up when your partner leaves, when your job disappears, when you're holding back tears in the bathroom so your children don't see you fall apart. It shows up when you're carrying responsibilities you never asked for, and still, you get up, put on your shoes, and face the world again. There is something noble in that, something that cannot be taught in schools or universities. That's the kind of strength that comes from being forged by reality, not protected from it. And people will say, well, she's so strong, she doesn't need anyone. No, that's not it. She needed support. She needed love. She needed kindness. But when it didn't come, she found another gear inside herself. She dug into a deeper layer, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. And that's where the transformation happens. In that moment where dependency falls away and you are left with the terrifying responsibility of your own survival. That is where the seed of power is planted. That is where identity is forged, not in the ease of success, But in the furnace of struggle, you see, the world isn't fair. We all know this. Some people are born with safety nets, with resources, with helping hands ready to catch them. Others aren't. And the tragedy of life is that it doesn't care about fairness. But the beauty of life, the astonishing beauty, is that even without fairness, without support, some people rise anyway. They create meaning from pain. They build structure out of chaos. They become strong not because someone handed them a reason, but because they chose to become someone capable of enduring. There is psychological power in that choice. It is the moment you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, who do I need to become to carry this? That shift is everything. It's the pivot from victimhood to agency. And it doesn't mean you don't hurt. It doesn't mean you don't cry or struggle or feel fear. In fact, real strength often looks like tears in the dark. It looks like questioning your own worth and choosing to believe in it anyway. It looks like getting up after you've been knocked down 1,000 times and saying, not today. I'm not done yet. And yes, it's lonely. Strength like that often comes with isolation because people don't always know how to be around someone who refuses to crumble. They assume you're fine because you carry it so well. They assume you don't need support because you stopped asking for it. But you do. And yet, you keep going. That's strength. That's dignity. That's what it means to be a warrior in the psychological sense. Not someone who avoids pain, but someone who walks directly into it and says, there is something in me that will not be destroyed. That kind of resilience, when it emerges in women who've been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, it is unstoppable. Because when someone realizes they can survive without approval, without validation, without a safety net, they become free. And that freedom, that's the real revolution. That's the kind of freedom that changes families, that raises stronger children, that builds legacies. You don't need the world's permission to be powerful. You don't need someone to rescue you to become worthy. You don't need applause to know you've done something incredible. If you're walking through your life carrying burdens you never asked for, showing up even when you're exhausted, holding others together while holding yourself up with hope and grit, you are the definition of strength. And let me tell you, the world desperately needs that kind of strength. Not the loud, performative kind, not the kind that's draped in perfection, but the kind that is quiet, steadfast, and forged in the moments no one sees. The kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, but is felt in the way others start to believe in themselves just by watching you refuse to quit. So if you're there right now, tired, overwhelmed, undersupported, don't think you're failing. Don't think you're weak. This isn't weakness. This is the middle of the climb. This is the moment when the old you is burning away and the new you is learning how to carry weight that once crushed you. This is where the roots go deep. This is where your power is being made, not in comfort, but in the brutal, beautiful, relentless pursuit of survival with dignity. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the birthplace of courage and connection. That's one of the most difficult truths for people to accept because the very idea seems counterintuitive. We live in a culture that glorifies control, composure, and perfection. We're taught from a young age that if we show pain, if we admit to struggling, if we allow people to see our broken pieces, then somehow we failed. And this pressure, this relentless demand to appear put together, it eats away at our authenticity. It isolates us, turns our lives into performances rather than realities. But the truth is, what most people call weakness is often just humanity in its rawest form. It's the cracked voice when you speak your truth for the first time. It's the trembling hands when you finally let go of something that's been slowly killing you. It's the tears you didn't want to shed falling in the quiet of a sleepless night. These aren't signs of defeat. They are signs of a heart that still feels, a soul that still fights to be heard. And that is not weakness. That is the beginning of everything worthwhile. There's something deeply paradoxical about vulnerability. On the surface, it feels like exposure, like danger. It feels like standing naked in a world eager to judge you. But when you step into it, when you stop pretending and start showing up as you are, that's when transformation begins. Because in that space, you are no longer controlled by fear. You're no longer shackled by shame. You are instead reaching for the truth of your experience. And that truth, painful as it may be, is the foundation of every meaningful connection you will ever have. People don't bond over perfection. They bond over pain. They bond over shared stories of survival, over the moments when life didn't go according to plan. Think about the people you trust the most in this world. They're not the ones who wear masks. They're the ones who dared to take theirs off in front of you. And yet, we spend so much of our lives hiding, thinking that if we show the world who we really are, we'll be rejected. But the rejection we fear is often far less severe than the disconnection we create by hiding. This is particularly devastating for women. So many women are raised in environments where emotional expression is both expected and dismissed. You're told to be nurturing, empathetic, soft, but the moment your emotions become too much, you're shamed for them. You're told to be open, but not too open. Strong, but not intimidating. Vulnerable, but not inconvenient. And so many women learn to suppress the very qualities that make them resilient. They begin to mistake silence for strength. They start to believe that burying their truth is the price of being accepted. But acceptance bought through self-abandonment isn't acceptance at all. It's performance. It's imprisonment. Vulnerability is not about spilling your pain recklessly. It's about showing up honestly. It's about saying, this is what I'm going through, without needing to justify it. It's the refusal to wear a mask, even when it's the easier option. And it takes incredible strength to do that. Because vulnerability means giving others the opportunity to reject you. It means risking judgment, misunderstanding, even ridicule. But it also opens the door to love, to real connection, to the kind of trust that doesn't just coexist with your flaws, it embraces them. When a woman stands in her truth, when she stops pretending to be unbreakable and starts acknowledging her pain, she becomes something fierce, not in spite of her vulnerability, but because of it. There is no courage without risk, no strength without exposure. And the woman who says, I'm struggling, but I'm here, is more powerful than the one who says nothing and suffers in silence. Too often, we equate emotional openness with fragility. Fragility is pretending everything is fine while you slowly crumble inside. Real strength is looking your pain in the eye and choosing to keep going anyway. It's admitting you're afraid and still moving forward. It's allowing yourself to feel deeply in a world that tries to convince you numbness is safer. Vulnerability is not simply emotional expression. It's radical honesty. It's acknowledging your limitations without shame. It's recognizing that perfection is not the goal. Growth is, and growth only happens when we stop pretending to already have all the answers. When we create space for uncertainty. When we say, I don't know, or I'm hurting, or I need help. And there is nothing shameful about needing help. Human beings are social creatures. We were not designed for isolation. We thrive through connection. But connection requires courage, the courage to be seen. When you allow yourself to be seen, you give others permission to do the same. That's how cultures change. That's how walls come down. And that's why vulnerability is not weakness. It's leadership. It's an invitation to step out of the shadows and into something real. When one person chooses to be honest about their pain, it creates a ripple effect. Tells others, you're not alone. And in a world full of silence and suppression, that one act of truth can be revolutionary. And yes, it's terrifying. Vulnerability doesn't feel safe. But it is necessary. If you want a life filled with meaning, depth, and love, you cannot build it while hiding. You must risk being known. That is the price. But the reward is profound authenticity, intimacy, freedom. You see, when you stop performing and start telling the truth, something miraculous happens. You begin to heal. not just emotionally, but existentially. You stop pretending to be someone you're not, and you finally step into who you are. And that self, the one you've buried under years of fear and expectation, that self is far more capable, far more courageous, and far more powerful than the mask you wore. So don't apologize for your vulnerability. Don't shrink from your truth. Let it be your strength. Let it be the bridge between you and the people who matter. Let it be the fire that burns away shame and leaves only freedom behind. Because the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more honesty, more courage, more women willing to stand in their full humanity and say, this is me, all of me, and I am not afraid to be seen. When women support women, entire systems begin to change. That isn't just a feel-good phrase. It's a psychological, social, and even cultural truth. It speaks to the immense potential that's unlocked when competition gives way to cooperation, when judgment is replaced by empathy, and when isolation is broken by the power of connection. Because for too long, women have been pitted against one another, subtly or overtly conditioned to believe that success is scarce, and the only way to rise is by stepping over each other. But that is a narrative rooted in fear, in scarcity, in structures designed to divide rather than unite. And it's a lie. The truth is, collaboration is one of the most potent forces in the human experience. And women, who have often been excluded from traditional power structures, have developed their own kind of power in the margins. It's the power of shared experience. The quiet, often unseen bond that forms when one woman sees another not as a rival, but as a reflection. When she says, without words, I know what it's like to carry this weight. Let me help you hold it for a while. That's the kind of support that doesn't just heal individuals, it begins to transform cultures. Psychologically, we know that humans are wired for connection. The need to belong is fundamental. But connection doesn't happen in environments of comparison and competition. It happens in spaces of vulnerability and trust. And trust is built when people feel seen, valued, and supported. When women create spaces for one another where it's safe to be both strong and struggling, both ambitious and afraid, they disrupt the cycles of shame and silence that have kept them fragmented. There is something revolutionary about a woman who has suffered deeply, choosing to reach out and lift another instead of retreating into bitterness. Because it's not easy. When you've been hurt, overlooked, underestimated, it's tempting to shut down, to say, no one helped me, so why should I help anyone else? But that's where the fork in the road appears. That's where the choice must be made to perpetuate the isolation or to break the cycle. And those who choose the latter, they're the architects of a new future. They're the ones building bridges instead of walls. You see it in mentorship. When a woman who has carved her way through adversity takes the time to guide someone just starting out. Not because she has to, but because she remembers how it felt to walk that road alone. That's where change begins. That's where strength multiplies. She's not just offering advice. She's offering hope. She's saying, your success doesn't threaten me, it completes me. And that, psychologically, is a sign of deep maturity. A person who is secure in their worth no longer sees others as competition. They see them as community. There's a profound shift that occurs when women begin to understand that their stories are not weapons, but tools. That their wounds, when shared with intention, become blueprints for healing. And when those blueprints are handed down generation after generation, the scaffolding of a more compassionate world is slowly constructed. The kind of support we're talking about here isn't passive. It's not about clapping politely when someone succeeds. It's active. It's intentional. It's asking, what do you need and how can I help you get there? And it's also calling each other higher. It's the kind of support that doesn't just comfort, it challenges. It says, I see your potential and I won't let you shrink. Because true support isn't always soft. Sometimes it's the honest friend who calls you out when you're sabotaging yourself. The mentor who says, no, you're not quitting. You're tired, not done. the sister who holds the mirror up to your face and reminds you of your power when you've forgotten it yourself. Here's the thing, this kind of support can't happen in a vacuum. It requires safety, it requires intentionality, and it requires a deep cultural re-education. Because for centuries, the dominant narrative has painted powerful women as threats, as too much, as dangerous. And so often without even realizing it, women have absorbed the belief that they must tone themselves down, or worse, that they must tear other women down to survive. But when that lie is exposed, when it's replaced with the truth that there is room for all of us to rise together, something miraculous happens. The system starts to shift, not just at the individual level, but structurally. Women who support women become a force for systemic change. They start businesses together, they launch initiatives that serve their communities, they enter politics, education, healthcare, and they bring with them a vision that's rooted in empathy and inclusion. And they raise children who see this model of collaboration and grow up believing that strength is not singular, but shared. There's also something deeply healing in this process, because for many women, life has been a series of silent struggles, pain carried quietly, victories uncelebrated. And when another woman steps into that silence and says, I see you, I believe in you, it breaks something open. It reminds you that you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not alone. That's solidarity. Real, authentic, unfiltered. It has the power to restore what life has tried to take. It doesn't mean there won't be disagreements. It doesn't mean support always looks like agreement. Sometimes support is walking alongside someone even when you don't fully understand them. It's choosing to believe in their humanity anyway. And that, from a psychological perspective, is an act of profound maturity. It requires you to transcend your own ego, your own insecurities, and operate from a place of purpose rather than fear. Support is also contagious. When a woman feels supported, she becomes more likely to support others. It creates a chain reaction, a network of care that extends far beyond any one individual. And this matters because isolated individuals burn out, but connected communities, they endure, they evolve, they become unshakable. We are living in a time when women are reclaiming their voices, their stories, their space. But the road ahead is still steep. There are still systems to dismantle, barriers to break. And that work cannot be done in solitude. It requires collective courage. It requires women turning toward each other instead of away. It requires a conscious decision every single day to choose empathy over judgment, encouragement over envy, collaboration over competition. When women support women, entire systems begin to change, not just externally, but internally. The inner architecture of what it means to be strong, to be feminine, to be worthy, it begins to transform. And in that transformation, a new kind of power emerges. Not the power that dominates or divides, but the power that connects and creates. The power that says, we rise together or not at all. One woman's breakthrough can be another woman's blueprint. That's the essence of legacy. That's what turns survival into purpose. When someone endures suffering, breaks a pattern, overcomes adversity, not just for herself, but so someone else doesn't have to suffer in the same way. That's the mark of something noble, something enduring. And it's easy to underestimate that. It's easy to look at your own life and say, who am I to inspire anyone? But you have no idea who's watching you, quietly learning from your perseverance, silently drawing strength from the fact that you didn't give up. Because people don't learn courage from theories. They learn it from examples, from real lives, from stories that reflect their own brokenness and still end with hope. And this is where your breakthrough becomes something far greater than personal success. It becomes a light in the dark for someone else, a map, a message. It's possible. And that message, that belief that change is possible, that healing is possible, that's what saves lives. The human psyche is deeply influenced by modeled behavior. We mirror what we see. We're more likely to do something if we believe it's been done before by someone who looks like us, talks like us, carries a story similar to our own. This is why representation matters, not just in media or leadership, but in the quiet corners of life, in the stories we share, in the way we live our truth in front of others. Because every time a woman stands up and says, here's what I've been through, and here's how I kept going, she opens a doorway in someone else's mind. She expands what's possible. And that's not always grand or glamorous. Sometimes it's the mother who decides to break the cycle of emotional neglect in her family. Sometimes it's the woman who walks away from a toxic relationship and starts over, or the one who chooses therapy after decades of silence. These aren't small things. These are revolutions of the spirit. And when they're witnessed by others, they multiply. Because what's more powerful than watching someone walk through fire and realizing you can too? But to be that blueprint requires honesty. It requires vulnerability. You can't inspire people with a highlight reel. You inspire them with truth, with the full picture. That means being open about your failures, your doubts, your fears. It means saying, this was the moment I almost gave up. Because that's what people need to hear. They need to know you didn't have it all figured out, that you were scared, that you had days when getting out of bed felt impossible. And yet you did it anyway. That's what inspires change. And here's something deeply psychological. When you give meaning to your suffering by helping someone else, you don't just heal others. You begin to heal yourself, because pain without purpose corrodes. It turns inward. It festers. But pain transformed into purpose, it purifies. It refines you. It lifts you. Viktor Frankl spoke of this, of the redemptive power of suffering when it is met with meaning. When we say, this didn't destroy me, it made me into someone I respect, we rewire the narrative. We reclaim our power. This is especially true for women who have been taught that their pain is to be hidden, that their trauma is shameful, or that their strength should be quiet. But when those same women start telling their stories, when they speak boldly, mentor willingly, lead fearlessly, they change the entire ecosystem around them. A healed woman doesn't just raise strong daughters. She raises emotionally intelligent sons. She creates healthier relationships. She builds communities where empathy becomes a norm rather than an exception. And let's not forget, this isn't just about personal development. It's about cultural transformation. When one woman dares to define success on her own terms, to value herself without permission, to lead without apology, she isn't just helping herself. She's shifting what's acceptable for every woman who comes after her. She's moving the boundaries. She's setting a new standard, not just of success, but of humanity. There's a story in every woman that, if told honestly, would shatter stereotypes and rebuild hope. And when those stories are shared, when they're lived out in the open, they start to connect. They form networks of wisdom, of guidance. That's mentorship at its finest, not some formal program, but the living testimony of someone who's walked through the fire and made it to the other side. And mentorship doesn't always require titles or platforms. Sometimes it's a conversation over coffee, a comment on a post, a moment of presence, a willingness to say, I've been there. You're not alone. This is how breakthroughs become blueprints, through action, through example, through women who choose not to hoard their healing, but to share it, who say, if I can do it, so can you, and mean it. That's how generations are changed, not by institutions alone, but by individuals who decide that their life will stand for something more than survival, something deeper. Something that leaves a trail others can follow. It's not easy to step into that role. There's fear, imposter syndrome, the voice that says, who am I to lead anyone? But leadership isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. People don't follow the flawless. They follow the honest. They follow those who've been bruised by life, but still walk with purpose, who admit their scars and still hold their heads high. And if you ever doubt your impact, think of the people who inspired you. Did they have perfect lives? Or did they simply have the courage to show up fully, even when it was hard? That's the legacy you have the power to create. not just in your family or your workplace, but in the quiet way your life speaks when you're not even trying to impress anyone, in the way you show up for yourself, in the way you speak truth into someone's despair, in the way you refuse to shrink. One woman's breakthrough is not just her own. It belongs to the world. It becomes a spark, a signal, a blueprint for those still trapped in the dark. And in that truth lies a responsibility, not a burden, but a calling, to rise not just for yourself, but for others, to become the living proof that healing is possible. That change is real. That strength, once awakened, can ripple out and echo through lives you'll never even see. No support, no problem, because you were never meant to wait for permission to be powerful.